Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wench Bench, where friends sit and talk about fabulous fictional females and how their stories have influenced us throughout our lives. My name is Alison.
My name is Fonda.
And today, Fonda and I are going to be talking about the two main female characters from the Exandria Unlimited Calamity episodes that just recently came out on the Critical Role.
Vigorously shaking. I'm very excited. This is going to be an episode that I think will be great to do with Alison because she has seen more of the Critical Role stuff than I have. She's seen both Campaign 1 and all of Campaign 2. I started at Campaign 2, am on Campaign 3, and have seen their Exandria Unlimited stuff. But a lot of the stuff that happened in this 4-part mini-series that they did were a lot of surprise things for me, but not for Alison, I don't think.
Yeah.
So this will be fun.
Yeah, a couple of the things I was like, oh, I know this.
I know, and I remember watching it and seeing some of the cast like freak out, and I'm like, I have no idea what this is about.
I don't know what's happening.
Which I think was nice. Anyways, Alison will be describing a little bit about like the world and overview, which is fitting because she's seen a majority of like their core content. So I think that will be great. But I want to briefly just say that Exandria Unlimited Calamity was GM'd by Bourbon and Lee Mulligan.
Woo.
Oh, what a gentleman and a scholar.
So
and it has
fabulous.
A great cast, but we're mainly going to be talking about the two female characters in the miniseries. Patia Porco, who was played by Marisha Ray. However, interesting note, Laura was supposed to be Patia Porco.
Oh, interesting.
Their like Instagram takeover, Marisha was talking about how like the base of Patia was made by Laura Bailey.
Ooh.
But she couldn't because of like scheduling reasons. So instead of like scrapping that completely, she kind of got this like draft work blueprint of Patia and then made her to what we saw on the show, which I think is interesting knowing that.
Yeah, it is really interesting.
Yeah, and then we have Laerryn Coramar-Seelie by Abria Iyengar, who was a GM of the 8-part series Exandria Unlimited. Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting thing. Both ladies did smashing.
Such a good job.
Smashing.
That's why we're talking about them.
Exactly. And it's the first one I think that we both did where we watched like the series of something. We were talking about wanting to do that where we both watched like a show or a series and then we talked about the characters from it. But a lot of the stuff we like is really long.
Yeah.
So this worked out great. That was only 4 episodes.
Yeah. It's only 4 episodes, but even then that's still what?
And the last 2 were like 5 to 6 hours.
20 hours?
Just as long as probably a normal season of a show.
Yeah, honestly.
Probably.
But I listen on like 1.5 2 speed on like the podcast form.
Yeah.
Which helps me pound through it a little quicker.
I definitely do that if I've missed the live show. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, before talking about them, I'm going to swing it to Alison, who's going to give you a like world explanation. And we're going to try to not be spoilery because it's still so new. And it's meant to be something that people can pick up without having watched any other Critical Role content.
Yes.
So we're going to try to be not as spoiler heavy as possible.
Yeah, so I basically stole most of what I'm about to say just from the wiki. Like, if you have any questions about locations and stuff, like they have, for a show with so much content, they have an excellently curated wiki. Like, they have all of the answers you would ever need. So if you're ever listening, if you decide, you know what, I want to try and pick up this like actual play podcast and see what it's all about by listening to this 4-part series. If you have any questions on like any of the lands, any of the things that they're referencing, you can just put that into the wiki and it'll fully explain it for you.
Oh, 100%.
It's so good. Exandria Unlimited Calamity is set in the Age of Arcanum, and it follows 6 adventurers as they uncover hidden corruption beneath the city they've sworn to protect. as they attempt to prevent the Calamity. So the Calamity is something that happened in the original campaigns of Critical Role. The Calamity happened like thousands of years before those campaigns happened. And it was this like huge, terrible thing that apparently lasted like 1,000 years. This age called the Calamity, where everything was terrible. Gods ran amok and horrible things happened in this planet. And nobody wants to go back to the Calamity. This is the cause of that.
What's the age called that they're
in the Age of Arcanum.
Yes.
So the Age of Arcanum comes before the Calamity.
Yes.
And the Age of Arcanum was the second age of Exandria, this world that we are inhabiting. So Exandria is like standard high fantasy D&D world, a bunch of races, all that stuff. There are indications that the Age of Arcanum lasted thousands of years. And during this time, mortals tested the limits of arcane power, challenging the gods. This has also been called the Age of Wanton Necromancy, because there were no laws against that kind of magic at this time. So basically just so much like hubris and pride in this time of just
unchecked practices.
Yes.
Is what I'll call it.
Yeah. And like unchecked ambition. It's like if you wanted to do something and had the mental capability of doing that, you fucking went for it. And not good things happened. The main story takes place on Avalier, which is a flying city and was originally built on the top of a mountain. These mages of this city that had dreams and ambitions decided to like take the top of the mountain and like disconnect it from the like ground. And then that top of the mountain flew around following magic ley lines, collecting like magical power from around the world. And then they would bring it back once every 7 years. They would put the mountain back where it belonged. And it would then refill the land with magic, and this is called the replenishment. And that's basically it. We got a bunch of fucking unchecked, ridiculously intelligent wizards who are not told no, who just do whatever they want without really thinking of consequences on a flying mountain that's gonna be landing soon.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a pretty it sounds like a lot, and I realize that probably sounds like a lot, but basically what you need to know is that this world is full of incredibly ambitious, incredibly intelligent magic users and others who live in this very privileged city. So it's like a magocracy. So
also if I remember correctly, it's very specifically stated that like the gods and deities like walk among the people. Like they're things you can witness. They're not just like, oh, I have a spiritual belief that maybe there's a deity listening to me as I pray within these woods. Like, it's like, no, you fucking see gods
just walking around
and people are like, yeah. Oh my gosh. So we're going to be talking about Patia Porco and Laerryn Coramar-Seelie, who I loved and hated them for two very different reasons throughout the show.
Yeah.
Like, at first, there were things about Laerryn that I was like, I don't like this thing. And it was great because, like, them as a cast, I think, knew what to do.
Yes.
Like, they got the homework and they nailed it.
Yeah.
On, like, what this 4-part series was about. And Patia, same thing, like, had like a love-hate with certain things, because again, like, you see the hubris, like, you see things and you're like, oh, like, for example, I know Beauregard would probably really dislike some of the characters that the cast plays to start, at least until she gets to know them. But by the end, I truly loved them both for their flaws, but at the beginning it was just more like who out of you 6 are going to press the button and can I figure it out now, because one of you's gonna fuck shit up.
And I found it fascinating that, like, of all the characters, like, yes, like the rest of the characters in this group of 6 who belong to a group called the Brass Ring. So they all kind of are like pulling strings in this society, doing like secret backdoor dealings and stuff. But the two female characters are arguably the most, like, I don't want to say corrupt, but but all the main characters are like, all the main male characters are kind of just cool with sitting back and kind of staying in their lane and just doing what their job entitles. Like, yeah, one guy just makes the robots and the fancy stuff that helps the city be cool.
Really fancy rich merchant man.
Like, really fancy rich merchant guy. Another guy is like a news person who is great. And then there's like a detective, and he's like there to make sure that the corruption isn't crazy. And the last one is like, I don't really know what he does, but he's got a dragon friend. And that's cool. And he was a pirate. So that's awesome. Oh no, wait, no. That's not the last one.
You're thinking of the merchant.
I'm thinking of the merchant.
The last
one is the paladin, who, wow, that guy's got a crazy
paladin
story.
Hubris.
And you should really watch for that guy, because like he is like the worst in quotations of the men.
And not even like a evil way.
No,
like,
not even in a
evil.
evil way. Just like, I guess, complex of the male characters.
Yes.
But yeah, like the female
Has
characters are like extremely ambitious, to the point of like, yeah, sacrificing the world as they know it in order to get to where they see this world and this city of theirs going, kind of like to make it better, always reaching for the stars, always wanting to improve. That I think it's Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park that's like they never stopped to ask if we could, like we were so focused on if we could do something, we never stopped long enough to ask if we should. I know that that's from Jurassic Park, but I can't remember if it was Ian Malcolm or not.
That's okay.
But yeah, like that very much encapsulates those two female characters, that they never stopped to consider, should we keep going? They're just like, nope, let's do it.
And the one thing that I think is interesting is like, none of us knew what was going to happen in the 4-part series. And so next time they do like a 4-sided dive, it's going to be the full cast of Calamity. And I'm interested to hear at that point what like the secrets or what everyone else's red button could have been. Because I'm sure Brennan had something that was like, I know how to get each and every one of you to cause it.
Yeah.
And we'll see which one happens first. Because I bet you they all had something that we just didn't see in the case of the 4-part.
Yeah, and the 4-sided dive is like an after show almost for Critical Role, where the cast talks about their characters. Yeah, that's the interesting part of this 4-part series, is that the DM, he had to figure out how to cause the calamity, essentially the end of the world, but also allow the players to play out their characters and have their own like ambitions and their own drives, while still knowing like one of them, or one or more of them, need to cause this. And it's like, oh no.
I know, right?
Like, as a person who has DM'd before, that is like the most stressful. Like, I would be terrified to try and attempt that. But then you are handed these two players with these two characters that you're just like, every once in a while as a DM, somebody does something and you're just like, oh, I'm so glad I can count on you.
Yeah. That was definitely, it seemed like Abria did a lot of those things.
Yes. Yeah, and there was one with all like the DMs, so Matt Mercer, Brandon Lee Mulligan, and Abria Iyengar, where they did like, where Brennan commended Abria on, she played Laerryn, on like how much studying she did. Because Laerryn essentially like operates, from my understanding, the engine that not only causes this city to fly, but also collects the magic.
Yeah, she's called the Architect Arcane is her title.
And so she's like a wizard who's a mechanic, which I love that concept. It's so cool.
It's so neat. And I really like how, like, sometimes she talks about having this, like, cool magical screwdriver. It's like, ah.
Yeah. And at one point she's like running into battle and she just grabs a giant fuck off wrench.
Yeah.
And she's just like, yeah, I'm just dragging this wrench in there. And I'm just like, yes.
She's very cool. We should probably talk a little bit about who each one is a little bit more before we dive. We kind of just like jumped right in. It's really good is what we're getting at. It's really good.
Yeah.
But again, so
I was gonna say, this episode might not be for everybody, but at the end of the day, we do this show for us, and hopefully some people can listen to it and have a good time.
Yes. Laerryn Coramar-Seelie, so she's an elven wizard.
Yeah.
Again, is the architect arcane. Super interesting. Her school of magic is abjuration, which is also very interesting. And her husband / ex-husband / love interest, because I don't want to spoil, is Laerryn, played by Sam Riegel.
That's like the news guy. He delivers the news.
He's great. Truly could talk all day about
Yes, truly could talk about this character and how much I love him.
He's awesome. Laerryn's interesting because she has like no patience for small talk. Like as soon as we're introduced to Laerryn, she's like introduced as being like one of the smartest people in the city. She took a vital but underappreciated job, and people like know she has a vital job, but because of the job she has, no one knows what the fuck she does, which is so interesting because everyone's like,
she's important. I don't know why.
She does something we need. Without her, it'd be bad, but I don't know what it is. And I love that concept. Basically, like the whole infrastructure of the city, like it wouldn't operate without Laerryn, which is so cool. But she's very like socially awkward. But also so smart. But she does a good job at I like, because of the rest of the cast and having like the pre-establishment that they're all really, really good trusted friends, long friends, or the Ring of Brass, you get to see her not be socially awkward. Yeah. You get to just see her as her person without like the weird social awkwardness, but still cool. Something that's noted in the show is she always talks about how she's dedicated her life for like protecting the heart of Avalier, which is like the core of what operates the city. That's sort of like what she does. But her whole thing that we get introduced for is that she wants to perfect what she will label the Astral Layrite, a new engine that she's created. Yes. That will build a new ley line, which Alison talked about. There's different ley lines on Exandria that do like magic, etc. But she wants to have a new one where they can just like go to other planes of existence, because that's not a thing that they can do, which is interesting.
At least not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But it would allow the city to travel like to other realms, so to speak, is what we get the gist of. So she's very cool.
She's so cool.
And then Patia Porco, also an elven wizard. She is called the Keeper of Scrolls and the Archmage of the Librarium Incantatum. First of all, fucking all the not names, but all the titles of things that Brennan Lee Mulligan was just dropping for the city of Avalier, being like this and this and this. I was like, I get it. Like, I get it. It makes sense for where they are.
It is fully in line with high fantasy mageocracy world. 100%. This is what a bunch of stuck-up, snobby magicians who think that they are better than everybody else would name shit. But holy shit, is it like... It's terrible. It's terrible, but it's excellent.
Oh no. 100%. It's bad. But just wanted to say, I had to pause sometimes to be like, okay, what's this thing again? Or quickly Google it. Yeah. Because again, the Critical Role Wiki would always have stuff the next day if I was trying to get
if you were ever lost.
Ooh, we're having a rainstorm.
We sure are.
If you hear it, that's what that is. Continuing though. Anyways, so Patia Porco is just like some interesting background. Her grandfather is like the only family member we hear her talk about a lot, often with like pride and nostalgia, is Emir Porco, who is the gentleman who like helped finally lift the city of Avalier off the mountaintop. The other people did it, but he like completed it.
Yeah, so he was like the mastermind of it.
He's like duly noted, and so everyone has like a lot of hopes for Patia, but she is a
lot of pressure.
Oh yeah, but she's the keeper of scrolls, so her whole thing is like having knowledge. She's like, at least to me, the epitome of like boss bitch.
Yeah.
Who's prepared for anything, and if she isn't, she will never let anybody else know she's not prepared.
Yeah. Will not sweat. Like, yeah. So awesome.
It's amazing. Her wizard subclass is scribe. Why? I didn't write it down because I thought I was good enough to remember.
Wrong.
Order of Scribes.
Oh, okay.
Is the subclass, which is in line with, you know, being a person that hoards books and knowledge. Love her so much, mainly because it's often talked about that like she knows so many secrets.
Yeah.
And there's a part I don't want to spoil, but like she has a secret about a player character that nobody else knows, not even the player character, because Brennan Lee Mulligan and Marisha Ray did a really good job at like keeping that to be something that would be like a really shocking surprise that made sense. Also, she is so fucking cool that someone, aka the Raven Queen, taught her how to do cool shit when she was a young child, but because of the Raven Queen ascension, doesn't remember who that lady was, but knows it was the Raven Queen before she ascended. And that to me is so fucking cool.
That is so cool. One of my favorite like pieces of lore that kind of came about was that in the original like campaigns, we found out that this god called the Raven Queen was like the only mortal to ever rise to god status through something that nobody knows what happened. And so we learned that what happens is that like there was already a god, because the Raven Queen is the god of death. There was already a god of death. So when this mortal rose to that status, all memory of who she was as a mortal was wiped, and all memory of who the god of death before was also wiped. So it like rewrote everything in like the consciousness
of everybody,
all of humanity, of all of existence.
The concept is so cool.
It's such a cool concept,
especially because when people, at least in the Age of Arcanum, talk about it, they're just like, yeah, it didn't make sense if the original god of death didn't understand death. Like, to truly have a god of death, someone else had to have died. Like, that needed to experience death. And I was like, I need more Raven Queen lore, please.
Oh my gosh. That was like also like such a cool part of this is if you have watched all of campaign 1, like all of campaign 2, are currently watching campaign 3, there are just these cool things that like they're not necessary for enjoying the episodes, but there are these little things where you're just like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, like I know what they're talking about. And to get that little bit of like extra backstory, even for somebody just like the Raven Queen. There's also a character that's like the servant of the Raven Queen, and his name is Pervon, and he was in the first, like he was mentioned in the first campaign, and they would not drop the name. And all of the players made fun of Matt Mercer for it for the longest time. And they're like, but who is Pervon? And we got to see him in this. And I was just like, oh, it's Pervon.
Yeah, same with, like, again, just such a cool thing. I didn't know who Pervon-Seelie was. Yeah. But everyone was freaking out about him. So I'm like, okay, campaign 1?
Yes.
But another thing was Vespin Chloris, who's like this super cool wizard of a wizard subclass that exists in 3.5, but not in 5e.
Yes.
A Malconvoker, I think is what it's called. Anyways, like we got to see why he is remembered as being like this incredibly evil person who purposely caused the calamity.
Yeah.
Which, don't want to say too much, but you find out a lot about him, and then you're like, oh my God.
You do, but it also does this great thing, which is just excellent storytelling overall, where in having other characters like Laerryn and like Patia, you see that he's not actually that bad. He just,
a lot.
like, the way that they structured this society and the way that they showed what happens when things like ambition and hubris at the end of the day, that's all, like, this is like why hubris is bad, the campaign. Like, that's all this story tells, is like, yeah, like, hubris is a bad thing, and that really is shown. It's like, yeah, this man is remembered, but everybody else, like, what he was doing was not actually that evil at the time. And so I just found it so fascinating that this, like, character of great evil from other campaigns, you're just like, oh, I kind of feel bad for him.
It does a really good job at, like, for anyone that's interested, again, side tangent, we'll get back to Laerryn and Patia, but it does such a good job at reminding everybody who's ever read a fucking history book.
Yes.
That history books are not correct.
No.
They hold partial information that's written by the losers or the victors. And even then, because it's written by a single person who maybe gets some feedback from like 5 other people to help them write something.
Yeah.
It's not
the bias.
It's not a true telling of history.
No.
Which I think just makes it so cool that it's like, to do that for a fictional world is like very nice.
Yes. Yeah.
Very nice.
The great thing about D&D
yes
is, yeah, like, you can tell these like very practical, these stories that like bring that kind of those lessons to life, where you're learning. It's like, oh, like, yeah, there's more to this story than all that like one person would tell. And getting to go back and have people like explore this history of this world that I love and I've come to really enjoy is so fascinating. And getting to watch, yeah, like these actors, these voice actors just do incredible things.
I know. And like Abria and Marisha Ray frickin' just like
they
knock it out of the park. Knock it out of the park.
Every time.
I am not going to say they're not listening to this, because I don't want to put that negative stuff into the world. But if they are, I want them to know that just hats off to you. I'm sure you've had enough people tell you how good of a job you two did, but truly, it was like a masterclass in character development in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and like Patia at first, like the character is very like closed off and very all you see.
She's also entitled.
She's very entitled, like, and very like privileged,
haughty, disdainful,
very prideful, very like, yeah, like all of the all of those things. And so she has this sort of like this mask and this presentation that's like, this is who the world expects me to be and this is who I have to be. I imagine much to like, it adds depth to the character. It adds kind of a reason behind why it is that she's acting like this, because yeah, her grandfather's this like massive influential figure and she has to live up to that. And then later, when like more of her backstory is revealed and you start realizing her like her flaws and her weaknesses and her insecurities.
And she is realizing the shit that's happening.
Like, yeah, she's starting to doubt all of these choices that she's made, all of these things that she was told, and these lessons that she learned.
And the secrets she kept.
And she's realizing that maybe she's wrong. And like, oh, that like that travel, that storyline is so fascinating.
I know. In like such a short period of time, we see her go from all those other like character flaws to remorseful and insightful and supportive and like in service of the people. Not that she wasn't before, because she wanted to help Avalier, but like also part of that was her own ambition and success.
Yes.
Like in service to the people, but if she could also gain some sort of benefit, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, but it showed for her, like you said, how if she doesn't like check herself,
Yes.
all the things she's worked towards are going to mean nothing. And at the end of the show, she realizes that. She's like, I hold so much knowledge, and she makes a really cool choice to send that knowledge to someone else instead of just fucking hoarding it, because at the end of the day, if she dies with it, then that's it.
Yeah. Like, she kind of realizes that the beautiful thing about learning is to then teach it, is to then share it. Like, if all you do is learn and collect knowledge without actually opening that up to other people to learn and experience, then what was the point in doing it in the first place? Like, kind of to go back to the idea of her working for the people, she specifically was working for the people who were in power, because that would elevate her status, that would improve, that was the extent of her worldview. And then we got to see that open up, and we got to see her realize, like, I shouldn't just be working for the people of Avalier, who are on the top, who are these super powerful mages, who are selfish, who are cruel, who do not actually care about the people who they have hurt along the way. And she's starting to realize, like, oh shit, like, these other people, like, these common people deserve all of these things too. And so, like, her desire, I think at the end she is still fighting for the people, but she's fighting for the right people now, instead of herself and the other like powerful fuckheads.
Oh, I know. The last episode was so good. How everyone was just like, fuck you, golden ring,
fuck
like,
you,
whatever.
magocracy. There's the upper echelon is the golden ring, and then obviously there's the silver ring, and then they down to the brass. So, you know, gold medal value. But yeah, like, they're just like, fuck these people who have done nothing but hurt and take and
have a cycle of hubris be the norm, so to speak. Fucking just, it's also just like for Marisha, who had played a druid, which is really a good nod. You'll find out why, but there's a, like, I feel like her Matthew Mercer was probably like, here's a little love letter to my wife. Oh my Brennan, gosh. Can we put this in there, please? Because it was so good.
It was so good.
But it was a nod to campaign one, Marisha Ray's character, Keyleth of the Ashari, who was a druid. It was so cool. But to have, like, her play a druid and then her play a monk of an order of the Cobalt Soul, where their whole thing is, like, knowledge needs to be shared and used correctly to not harm people, and then to see her be someone who's like,
who learned that lesson,
who
the
learned
hard way.
It's just like, it's so cool. It's so cool how, like, oddly, like, all connected in a way of, like, these experiences that Marisha sort of garnered for, like, different stories.
Yes, because in this little short campaign, we learn where the Ashari came from, because their people survived through the Calamity and were, like, a part of when this city got raised up into the sky. They had to make this whole deal, and they're like, you're literally taking a chunk of our mountain.
Yeah.
Like, so they had this deal for magic, and it was all this, like, convoluted stuff. But when they mentioned, like, the only thing that survived of this, like, ancient druidic order was, like, a pieced together version of the name, because it was a longer name, and it was just Ashari, and you're just like, oh my god. Campaign 1.
It was so cool.
And yeah, just the way that they, like, piece it together, and to see Marisha get to kind of explore all of these different aspects of characters with this, like, kind of strange, like, centralized theme that somehow strings them all together. It's just so cool.
It's really neat, and I really like, again, at first I was like, oh, Patia, like, you're really cool, but also, like, in general isn't the type of character I gravitate towards in stories.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know, like, that's the whole purpose, is, like, everyone here is, like, level 14. They've lived a life. They're powerful, strong fucking people that I feel like we got plopped into a campaign that was just ending after they had all their other stuff to, you know, work. It was just so cool. But to to know that I was like, oh, I like all the cast. I'm gonna like their characters in some way or be interested, and to feel like I didn't like Patia until it was like episode 3, where I was like, oh my god, like to see the development play so quickly and so many cool things happen. By the end, I was just like, I was so sad because obviously everyone knows it's the Calamity. People are gonna die.
People are gonna die.
So by like the second episode, when I'm getting more and more like invested, because I do end up really liking everybody, even though they were all like prickly to me at the beginning. I was just like, I know,
intentional.
I know, but I was like, I don't want you all to die. I'm so sad.
Yeah. And I got the honor of listening to this last episode while I was working at a hospital. So I was like staring out a window in the like, and we were having like a thunderstorm at the time too. So I was like staring out a window, waiting to go test some stuff, just like trying not to cry.
Yeah, Alison was like, oh my god. And I'm like, oh.
The weather outside matched like the feeling in the podcast. I was like, this is all working together. Just sitting on a bench alone, staring out a window.
I know. I cried so hard. I didn't cry for the first 2 episodes, but episode 3 and 4 for sure. 4 for sure. But I had a lot of moments where I was like, just sniffling mess.
Yes.
And then Laerryn. Oh, Abria, you storyteller movie woman, you tell stories like they're movies, and I love it so much.
Oh my gosh, the way that she like describes action scenes is so like you can visualize it. And she is so good at that. Oh god, I love her so much.
I know. Laerryn's very confident.
Yes.
Like about which, if you're going to be an engineer of any kind, a scientist, also just a wizard, like there has to be confidence. Otherwise you're going to, fuck up.
Yeah.
You don't want to fuck up. And that's why wizard hubris is a thing. If you keep not fucking up and keep doing things, and it comes out perfect, and then you never check. Anyways, Laerryn is like, again, socially awkward, but also really cool. I think Abria does like a wonderful job at sort of like allowing us to see the little insights for why she makes choices.
Yes.
Which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
But like, it's interesting because there's certain parts where like Travis Willingham's character named Sarah is like asking Laerryn questions.
Yeah, that's the like investigator. It's his job to make sure that wizards aren't fucking up.
Yeah.
And his friend is fucking up.
Yeah. And he's like asking her questions, and she's like, well, and like she's trying to explain it because she doesn't want her friend to like obviously be pissed at her. But pointedly, he's like, it's yes or no. And so she answers his questions accordingly, which results in him making a choice that was really bold for his character, but it showed that like the distrust some of them have with each other.
Yes.
Because they don't know everyone's secrets and they're not as close as maybe they thought they all were.
Yeah.
Comes about a lot with Laerryn.
Yes.
Because, she has an ex-husband. Her ex-best friend is the dead husband of another person's character. And she's like boss bitch best friends with Portia, Patia.
I know. I wanted to call her Portia all the time.
You know what's funny? Marisha Ray did that in episode 1. She got fucked up, so I don't feel bad. No. But it's just so cool how it's kind of like for someone who's lived their whole life in service of like these ley lines, these engines, etc. And she seems very like shut away. She was the one with the most like connections and somehow. Secrets in this weird way. Which I was like, oh.
Yes. The way that she deals with like social situations and stuff really reminds me of, there was like a time in the comics where somebody was, I think it was Quicksilver that they were talking to, one of the superheroes who like runs really fast. And he was explaining like kind of why he's such an asshole to people. And he's like, do you have any idea how slow you are? Because like, and then that just got me thinking, it's like, yeah, imagine everything you do he exists at a higher speed compared to everybody else. So listening to somebody else talk, listening to somebody, like waiting for somebody else's brain to work as fast as his does. And I like very much connected that same thing to like, to the intelligence that Laerryn has, is trying to explain what makes so much sense to her to somebody who does not match her intelligence, and the frustration that that can bring when having to deal with people who do not understand that. So like I saw that in the way that the character interacted with other characters, because when she was with Patia, they were like
always
on the same page, because Patia is also incredibly intelligent. Also, like, they worked together on a lot of this project, this mystery project we're not going to talk too much about.
Yeah.
And so you can see her when she's with somebody she respects and when she's with somebody that can keep up with her. And then you see when she's with people who can't, and she just has no fucking patience. She's like, you know what? I can't do it. And it very much reminded me of that like Quicksilver thing. And it's just like, I get that. Like, what's it like being the smartest person in the room? And it's like, that's one of the hard parts about playing a highly intelligent character, but Abria did it so well.
Yeah. Also, like, it was interesting too, because we see one of her many flaws is that, like, she doesn't care about some things other people care about.
Yeah.
Because to her, she's like, but at the end of the day, Laerryn wanted to do something for the betterment of the people.
Yes.
But no one understood that or saw that.
No.
Because they didn't.
But also
it.
Kind of for herself.
Yeah.
100%.
To prove that she could.
Yeah, to prove that she could.
Yeah.
And so she's like, it is for the people, but it's also to prove that I can.
Yeah. But like at one point, Loquacious is asking her, like, hey, when we like land for the replenishment, we know a lot of the same people. Can we try to be cordial? Like, he's basically just asking, like, can we not cause a lot of drama? Because I want us to enjoy.
I want us to have fun.
Yeah. And she's just like, I don't care about your social circle right now. Like, her whole thing was like, she, I think, thought that he was just being like, oh, I only care about my social status and the people around me and what they view of me. When I think for him, he was just like, I want people to care about you. So let's like try to show some semblance that we're going to be better.
Yes.
But for her, she was like, oh my gosh, there's other things more important than your social status.
Yeah.
Which caused them like butting heads in some ways.
Because like he understands that it is important to be like, especially in like a position like hers where she does rely on like, I imagine some sort of funding, some sort of trust, like people actually like giving her what she needs. Like, you can't be an asshole to everybody. No. That's not how the world works.
No.
Ever, anywhere. I don't care what fantasy world you're in. Like, that is not how, like, people interact with one another. And he's like, I'm trying, he's trying to help her. And it's so cute. And I love him so much.
I know. Especially when you find out that he covered up a lot of her.
Yes. Yeah.
Past boo-boos, probably.
Well, there's like the really lovely like little line that they did that doesn't really give anything away, but they're kind of talking about how because to be Fae is like a different, like it's a different plane essentially. And that's kind of what they're trying to travel to. So even though the Fae can travel in and out, people can't in this world. And so they kind of talked about how like, yeah, people have met others from the Fae, like ordinary people, and then they fall in love with the Fae, and it's like, but this time a Fae fell in love with a human, and it was like tears and
so cute.
Heartbreak.
It was so cute. Fuck you, Sam Riegel.
You could just see how much he loved her because of her intelligence and her ambition, but despite her hubris, like despite those things that were negative about it, he's like, I understand your intentions are good. He had so much faith and so much trust in her, and I think it just elevated her character to be like that much more complex, because like we didn't get to see their relationship, we didn't get to see them falling in love, but the way that the Loquacious character acted, it made you feel that way towards her character as well. So it created this like additional depth, which is just one of the many, many incredible things about like group storytelling, that it made her character so much more interesting, because it's like, yeah, like how did she make this incredible Fae creature like fall in love with her? And it's just like, she just did. Like,
I know, and it's just like, it's so good, so good. Another thing I super enjoy about Laerryn, but also like Bria, is the knowledge and understanding of receiving so much information that's like pertinent to a campaign as a player. And then obviously no one wants to metagame, no one wants to do like the meta pigeon, so to speak, and like whatever. But for her to be like, oh man, if I knew this information, because there's some stuff she doesn't find out.
Yes.
And it's like, if her character would have loved certain things about this mystery tree, which I don't want to talk too much about, but there's a fucking tree.
There's a mystery tree, and it's a big deal.
And Laerryn hates the tree. But I think Bria was answering some questions on Twitter or something, where people were talking about how like Laerryn probably would have fucking loved the tree if she knew what the tree was doing.
Yeah.
She would have loved the tree. And so it's just like, anyways, this tree causes drama.
The drama of the tree.
And I I'm just so emotional over these two women.
They're so good. And they're so like they're so flawed and
I know.
Intriguing.
And in a really good way. One thing, I guess, like side tangent, there's a part where they're all in like a truth spell, so to speak, and everyone's like, we gotta like air shit out, we gotta like be front and talk about each other. Interestingly enough, and I think it's just because of the way questions were being asked and time of the show, only Marisha Ray, Bria, aka Patia, and Laerryn were being asked these pointed questions. Because the whole time something happens with the paladin and no one fucking asks the paladin questions. Yeah. And it's like they're all being like, oh, well, what about you, Laerryn? Or what about this, Patia? And it's like, yeah, okay, like their issues are obvious in the air, you know what I mean? Like they're easy pickings. Yeah. Right? But it's so sad because at the same time I'm like, but what about everybody else? What about
that dickhead over there?
Yeah. What about talking to the Fae person that's really good at deceiving? Maybe now is a great time to like. Anyways, it was just so like interesting how. I'm not saying that there was any like misogynistic tendencies that popped up. Clearly, that's not the case. But just with how the story was played out, it was interesting that it was like two women in power were going to be knocked down first, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah, which like I'm going to argue that it kind of is like not intentional like misogyny, but yeah, like when there are in fiction or in reality, when there are ambitious women in leadership roles, they tend to get targeted with a lot more suspicion. It's just how it is. And like, again, I'm not at all saying that like any of these players ever intended that. Like, no, 100% not at all. The way that the story rolled out, like it did make sense for them to be like kind of going after these two characters because they played the characters so well. But it's like, yeah, like you're gonna like question it and kind of be like, oh, like what are those ladies up to?
Yeah, or even then everyone's like, oh, I know that I didn't see the paladin do this thing, so I can't ask the paladin about the thing that I as a player want to know. They did such a good job, but it was like, oh, I just fucking it's juicy.
It's so good.
It's so juicy. And the other NPCs that Brennan makes to counteract, to complement, to be a foil to these two women is also really interesting, because there's like a high level necromancy wizard that's a woman, and like her interaction with Patia is weird and cool, and then Patia's interaction with like a subordinate of hers, who helps like run some of the engines, is also really interesting. And there's just like, oh, I'm really excited for the four-sided dive because I really just want to know more, because we couldn't in such a short span of time. I know. And now they're dead. That's not a spoiler.
The story's over.
The story's called Calamity, okay?
Calamity happened at the end.
The bad things happen.
They were never gonna stop it. Because it had to happen because it was in canon. That's so good.
Can I ask what, like, for some reason, for it being so short and only 4 episodes, it was so easy for me to get engaged in this series. Like, I don't know what it was about it. I think it was a mixture of, like, we didn't have that awkward meeting of the characters. Like, there was a clear, like, they probably had a bunch of prep before filming the series of being like, these are all the things our characters know about each other, maybe play tested some interactions so they could see, because it really felt like, and not in an awkward way where, like, if I was to try to watch campaign 1 of Critical Role and only watch the last 4 episodes, I think I wouldn't have had the same experience as watching this. But it really felt like we were getting dropped into a series where there's not that weird, awkward, like, getting to know each other.
Yes.
Or learning about everyone's characters. Or being like, oh, are they going to find happiness and success and things? Like, we meet them at their prime.
At their prime, and we know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
It is the wildest, like, experience.
I know. Like, we know that everyone's going to fall because of the Calamity. And they fall hard and they fall fast.
Yeah.
And I freaking just... I really recommend it. Even if you're never going to watch anything else, especially because of Brandon Lee Mulligan. He's a really good storyteller.
He's such a good storyteller.
And I think he does a really good job for what the series needed to be. And I think if you're going to watch anything, I think you should watch that because it's really cool. It's a good story. It's a good story about hubris for wizards and paladins and why in the real world power should get checked.
Yeah, you gotta check some some leadership there.
Oh, I know. One thing that I loved, Alison and listeners, it was really interesting. They're like, oh yeah, all the oracles are taking a break, and everyone's like, oh, okay. A few people are like, let's go figure out why. Yeah. But in my head, I'm like, that is the biggest red flag. If all your oracles are like, we're taking a break, isn't that like, you know,
probably a bad thing?
Probably really bad.
Yeah, I was just like, what? Brendan Lee, the fucking DM's just waving a red flag, like pointing in a direction, and everybody's like, let's go this way.
No, let's go do this first. And it's just like, oh,
such
so
the
poignant.
Pain of DMing.
I know.
You're just like, this way. You are directing with shining lights.
I'm trying to give you some traffic.
Yeah, and yet everybody's just like, that door though.
Yeah, let's do these things first because that will be there. And it's just like, yeah, but anyways, it's really good.
It was so good.
Can I ask, what were the 2 sort of like moments where you really fell in love? Like, what was a thing that they did that you were like, oh fuck no, I like you, and I know you're gonna die. And now I'm sad.
Yes. So for Patia, there was like the part where I realized that like I liked her character, and I was like, oh, like this is a juicy character. Like she's more than what she seems. It's like
she's more than a boss bitch.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's the first time that she talks to like the subordinate mage or whatever, and you kind of, the way that Marisha describes it, it's like she's just kind of putting up with them. Like, these are her, like, they are above her in status, and she just is like, no, bitch, I am above you in intellect and in every way that fucking matters. Like, you are beneath me. And it's just like the confidence. And yeah, like, so that part was really good. And then just the way that she would always go talk to like the statue of her grandfather, and getting those little like moments of, I don't want to say weakness, like tenderness, and kind of like these little insightful moments where it's just like there is so much she has to live up to, and there is so much pressure on her shoulders, and it just like lets you get a little peek inside her character.
Yeah, especially because like, for all the other characters, we know that Laerryn has Loquacious, Sarah has a family, Xerxes, who is the paladin, he has a kid, and then there's Nidus, who is single, ready to mingle.
Yeah.
But he has like a whole bunch of pirate people that we know that like helped him make this cool thing. So he has like a family. But Patia's the only one where it's like we have no fucking idea about her parents.
No.
She doesn't seem to have a significant other, no kids, and she talks about her dead grandpa.
Yeah.
Like it's so sad a little bit, right? Like it's just like, but her family, I guess, is the Ring of Brass, which is heartwarming. But then also you're just like,
yeah, but you also know that, like, to an extent, all of the people who belong to the Ring of Brass still keep each other's at arm's length.
Yeah.
Like, they all still are not, like,
telling each other their secrets. Yeah.
So yeah, like I liked like the little things from Portia. Kind of, I think they all
Patia.
sort of, or from. God damn it. I like the little things from her that I think built up to then be like, oh shit. Like all of a sudden it like took me by surprise. And I was like, oh damn, I actually like her. When did this happen? Whereas
she swept me under the rug.
Laerryn, when she like called the robot to her in this fight, and she's just like, she brings a robot to life to like fight for her, and it like fucks up this enemy. And she is just ruthless, and this thing comes to life, and it's like, oh, I finally get to fight for the Architect Arcanum, and this robot's so excited to like, or this statue is so excited to fight for her, and it was just this super badass like combat moment.
Oh, Laerryn was a bitch, and I mean that in the nicest way, like a boss ass bitch in fights.
Oh my god, so cool in fights. And so yeah, like when she just like raised this statue to fight for her, it was so cool. I was just like, oh my god. Yeah, what about you?
For me, for Patia, there were a few little moments. As I said, I misspoke the phrase, but like I feel like Patia just like took the rug from under me, and I was like, oh my god, laying on the floor being like, I like you, oh no. But for me, it was when she was like replaying a thing that Sarah had said to everybody before he made a choice to not be with the group. And she like, Marisha just did such a good job of being like, I replay what he's saying over and over and over again, I repeat it. It was just such like she realizes that she needed people close to her to like tell her what she was doing wrong.
Yeah.
And she hasn't had anybody to sort of do that, because everyone above her, like you said, she's like, you don't know shit.
Yeah.
But I really liked that part. That's when I really felt like empathy with Patia. And that's when I was like, oh. Like, I think we've all been there. We're repeating a scene of something that happened with people we care about, and we're like, I fucked up. Or you're like, oh, that what they said wasn't wrong necessarily. And that's something that I felt like a connection to. And then Laerryn, my God, that woman. I really enjoyed her character the most when there was the Bolo scene.
Oh.
Bolo's this random NPC that shows up for like one episode, never to be heard from again. And that's when I knew Laerryn had like some quirks that I was going to enjoy.
Yeah.
She just goes up and she's like, who's this bitch? And I'm like, yes, I respect that. But again, she was also really cool in fights. But also, so was Patia.
Yes.
Like, she does this really cool spell to a necromancy wizard that was like so fucking cool. The whole thing's cool. The whole thing is a masterpiece. It's like the dice told a really good story.
They sure did. Holy shit.
And they knew how to go with the punches, which was what also made it really, really good. But anyways, I just really wanted to talk about these two women because they've been on my mind. And it's just another reason why I love group storytelling. Because I don't think I would enjoy a story like this if it was just one person telling it and writing it. Like, that's why I love actual play podcasts and stuff so much, and shows, because it's so cool to see them all come together to tell a story, and I just like it so much.
Yeah.
Anyways, Alison, is there anything you're excited about?
Yeah, right now I'm kind of getting back into reading again.
Me too.
So, kind of a blend of essentially like young adult fantasy kind of vibes stuff,
okay.
but then also like fantasy spice. So, I have a book on order called Neon Gods.
I have that on order. High five!
Apparently super spicy. And
it's a Greek mythos.
Yes, it's a retelling of the Persephone Hades story. But then I also have another one by the exact same author called like Something Divine. And it's a retelling of like Jasmine and Jafar.
Oh.
Yeah. So like Jasmine's obviously the main character, but it's kind of a retelling of like Aladdin. But yeah, like spicy books.
Yeah.
But then also
I have
I ordered the final book in the Diviners series by Libba Bray. And I will probably be talking about the main character because holy shit, is she complicated. And I love her so much. But yeah, the Diviners is like, takes place in the 1920s in this sort of like alternate version world where there are people called diviners who have supernatural capabilities. So the main character, Evie, she can read the history of an object when she touches it. And it's kind of, parts of it get like really spooky and like really creepy. And there's this like other world with this guy called the King of Crows who's super creepy, who like feeds off of like chaos and death. And it's fabulous and it's dark and it's creepy. And there were just like, at one point in like, because I read another one of her series as well. I love her as a writer just in general. And there's always like a chapter of like very PG spice where like the characters like that you've been waiting books to see like actually get together. And you're just like, oh my God, they finally did it. And you're so fucking excited. And like, it always has to like, she just does such a good job at like leading up to these like these long slow burn romances, and you're finally just like, yes. And you're so excited. And so that was like kind of the end of this book. They all like, all the couples that you've been wanting to get together finally are kind of like seem like they're happy, and then she's like, oh, guess what, there's another book, so they're not going to be happy anymore. And then she just like breaks it all at the very end of the book. And she's just like, yeah, you wanted a happy ending, you don't get it yet. So I'm very excited to read the last book and see how it all goes. And then maybe I'll talk about it. There's like a bunch of really cool female characters that I just...
That's
they're
fair.
so good.
That's fair. Books are great.
Yes.
I hate when I'm super busy and I can't read a book because life just, you know.
Yeah, I've started like when... I've started trying to kind of retrain myself that when I'm just like laying there, like watching TikTok, doing nothing, it's like, you should go and read some of your book.
Yeah, like instead of mindlessly looking at it.
Like none of my books are particularly like it's not like when I'm reading like Game of Thrones or like any like super high fantasy, really difficult to read books. Like I just want easy, I kind of like get an idea like it's gonna end happily, whether it's after 4 books or whether it's after 1. Like I want that happily ever after. I want to know I want to be aware that whatever they're going through in the pages, it's gonna end well. And I think that's why I like reading romance so much, because it's like I know that it's gonna end well, it's gonna be fine. And so I don't have like that kind of story anxiety. Yeah. Like I do when like doing something like if a particularly harrowing like D&D session ends bad, I'm just like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Because you don't actually know what's gonna happen. Whereas like I can read this book and I can just be in my little happy space reading. And so yeah, I'm very excited that I'm getting back into reading again, because I used to do it a lot.
Well, I'm excited for you to see. I'm probably not going to read Neon Gods until after I finish the 3 other books I told myself I would read. That's but fair. I'm still excited that we both have a mutual book.
Yes.
To come in.
Yeah. I'm very excited. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed our episode if you stuck around. I know that was probably a lot of like inside baseball for people, but you know,
I didn't want to spoil it. it.
This is our podcast. We can do whatever the fuck we want.
Ha ha. We don't have a manager.
Super don't. We don't even have that. Like, we love the listeners we do have. But at the end of the day, yeah, this is for us. So hopefully you got some joy out of listening to us. Be super excited about all those ladies and books and reading and D&D and stories.
Mm-hmm.
You can find us wherever podcasts can be found. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. Now that we can get star ratings on Spotify, please do that. That would be so helpful. You can also follow us on Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Wench Bench Pod. And if you want to reach out, you can send us an email at wenchbenchpod@gmail.com. All of the art for the Wench Bench was designed by the wonderful Tessa Joyce Riecken. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram at Werevile. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Exandria take it back. Water down.
I got it. It's fine. That's why I have a lid on it.
That's why it's on the floor, not on the table. Where all
I'm a dipshit.